The Federal Reserve just made a decision that will destroy the American middle class. Not might, will. And if you understand what I'm about to show you, you'll see it's already happening. Right now, the United States is carrying $38 trillion in national debt. The interest payments alone just crossed $1 trillion per year. That's more than we spend on defense, more than we spend on Medicare. And the Fed just cut rates again. You know what that means? They're choosing inflation over collapse. They're choosing to destroy your savings rather than let the system fail. Fiscal restraint. People trust the currency because it's backed by something real, something tangible, something that can't be printed into existence. Stage 2. Expansion and temptation. Success breeds confidence. Confidence breeds borrowing. Wars get funded. Social programs expand. Deficits become normal. The central bank steps in as the buyer of last resort. Money creation accelerates. But everything still seems fine because growth masks the decay. Stage 3. Crisis and desperation. The debt becomes unsustainable. Interest payments devour tax revenue. The central bank faces an impossible choice: raise rates and crash the economy, or print money and destroy the currency. They always choose to print. That's where we are right now. Stage 4, collapse and reset. Hyperinflation or default. Currency loses all credibility. Savings evaporate. Social order fractures. The system resets, usually through chaos, sometimes through war, always through the destruction of middle-class wealth. You think this sounds dramatic? You think this is fear-mongering? Let me show you the receipts. Rome, the greatest empire the ancient world ever saw. At its peak, it controlled the entire Mediterranean. Unmatched military, engineering marvels, a currency, the denarius, that was trusted from Britain to Egypt. Stage 1 was solid. The denarius started at 95% pure silver, real money, real value. Rome's economy thrived on conquest, trade, and taxation. Citizens could trust that a coin minted in Rome would hold the same value whether you spent it in Gaul or Alexandria. But then came Stage 2. Emperor after emperor expanded the military, built monuments, funded massive public works. The Colosseum wasn't cheap, neither were the legions guarding thousands of miles of frontier. The cost of maintaining the empire exploded, so they did what every government does when it spends more than it takes in. They debased the currency. Nero started it. He reduced the silver content to 90%, then 85%. Each emperor shaved a little more, a little more. By the time you get to Emperor Aurelian in the 3rd century, the denarius was less than 5% silver. 5%. The rest was bronze coated in a thin silver wash. It looked like silver. It felt like silver. But it wasn't silver. Sound familiar? Stage 3 hit hard. Inflation spiraled out of control. Prices doubled, tripled, quadrupled in just decades. A measure of wheat that cost 8 drachmas in the 2nd century cost 100 drachmas by the end of the 3rd century. Citizens lost faith in the currency. Merchants refused to accept it. The government responded by enforcing price controls. Didn't work, never does. When you make it illegal to charge market prices, sellers just stop selling. Trade collapsed. People reverted to barter. Soldiers demanded payment in food and goods rather than worthless coins. The tax base imploded. Stage 4, the Western Roman Empire disintegrated. Not from barbarian invasion alone. The barbarians walked through a door that monetary collapse had already opened. When your currency is worthless, you can't pay soldiers. When you can't pay soldiers, you can't defend borders. When you can't defend borders, the empire fractures. And it did. Into warring states, into chaos, into what we call the Dark Ages. 500 years of civilizational decline. All because they printed their way out of debt. Check. Verified. Undeniable. Same pattern, different century. Weimar Germany, 1920s. You've heard about the hyperinflation. You've seen the pictures of people using worthless banknotes as wallpaper. Wheelbarrows full of cash to buy a loaf of bread. Children playing with stacks of million-mark notes like building blocks. But do you know why it happened? Stage 1. Germany before World War I had a disciplined monetary system. The Reichsmark was backed by gold. The Bundesbank maintained strict standards. Germany was an industrial powerhouse. Manufacturing, engineering, exports, a thriving middle class, economic stability. Stage 2. The war destroyed everything. Germany borrowed heavily to fund the war effort. They issued war bonds. They printed money. They promised victory would pay for everything. But they lost. The Treaty of Versailles demanded 132 billion gold marks in reparations. Impossible sum. Absolutely impossible. The entire German GDP was only 12 billion marks per year. So the Weimar government did what desperate governments do. They printed. At first, slowly. Then faster. Then exponentially. The government needed to pay reparations. It needed to fund pensions for war widows. It needed to rebuild infrastructure. It needed to keep the population from revolting. So the printing presses ran day and night. Stage 3 came fast, terrifyingly fast. In 1921, $1 bought 75 marks. By November 1923, $1 bought 4.2 trillion marks. Trillion, with a T. Let that sink in. In less than 3 years, the currency lost essentially all of its value. Prices doubled every few days, then every few hours. Workers were paid twice a day because money lost value faster than they could spend it. People would rush to the store during lunch break to buy anything real, before their morning wages became worthless. A loaf of bread cost 200 billion marks. A newspaper cost 200 billion marks. A single postage stamp cost 50 billion marks. Life savings became worthless overnight. Imagine working your entire life, saving diligently, building a nest egg of 100,000 marks, enough to retire comfortably, and then watching it become worth less than a single loaf of bread. Pensions vanished. Insurance policies became jokes. Bonds became toilet paper. The middle class was annihilated, completely erased. But the wealthy, they survived, because they held real assets: land, factories, foreign currency, gold. Inflation destroys cash. It doesn't destroy assets. The gap between rich and poor exploded. Stage 4, political chaos. The population was desperate, angry, humiliated, hungry. They looked for someone to blame, someone who promised simple solutions. We all know what came next. Hitler rose to power on the back of that economic devastation. Weimar hyperinflation didn't just destroy wealth. It destroyed society. It destroyed democracy. It led directly to World War II. Monetary collapse doesn't just hurt your bank account. It tears apart the social fabric. It creates the conditions for extremism, for violence, for war. Check. Verified. Undeniable. Same pattern, different continent. Now, let me give you an example that's even more relevant, because this one happened in our lifetime, while you were watching Netflix, while you were scrolling social media, while mainstream media barely covered it. Venezuela. 20 years ago, Venezuela was the richest country in South America. Not one of the richest. The richest. Stage 1. Venezuela. In the 1970s and 80s had massive oil reserves, strong middle class. Caracas was a modern, thriving city. Shopping malls, universities, healthcare, a stable currency, the bolivar. People had hope. Opportunity. A future. Stage 2. Socialist policies expanded rapidly under Hugo Chavez. Price controls, nationalization of industries. Government spending exploded. Free housing, free healthcare, free education, subsidized food, subsidized fuel. Universal basic income before it was trendy. All of it funded by oil revenues. And for a while it worked. Oil prices were high. Money flooded in. The government could afford its promises. But economies don't run on promises. They run on production. And when you nationalize industries, when you impose price controls, when you punish success and reward dependency, production collapses. Venezuelan oil production peaked at 3.5 million barrels per day in 1998. By 2020, it was down to 300,000, a 90% collapse. 90%. Then oil prices crashed in 2014, and the whole facade collapsed with them. Stage 3, the government was trapped. It had made promises it couldn't keep, social spending commitments, debt payments, public sector salaries. But revenues were gone, so they did what desperate governments always do. They printed bolivars, massive quantities, exponential quantities. Inflation hit 1,300% in 2017, then 1,000,000% by 2018, 1,000,000% inflation. That's not a typo. Prices doubled every 18 days. Every 18 days, everything cost twice as much. Grocery stores emptied, not because there was no food in the country, because price controls made it illegal to charge what food actually cost. So farmers stopped farming. Truckers stopped trucking. Store owners stopped stocking shelves. Why sell at a loss? Why work for currency that's worthless? Medicine disappeared. Hospitals ran out of basic supplies. People died from treatable conditions. Cancer patients couldn't get chemotherapy. Diabetics couldn't get insulin, not because the medicine didn't exist, because the currency was worthless and the economy had collapsed. People lost an average of 24 pounds, not from dieting, from malnutrition, from hunger, in one of the most resource-rich countries on Earth in the 21st century, in the modern era. Stage 4, mass exodus. Over 7 million people fled the country, 7 million, out of a population of 30 million. They walked across borders with whatever they could carry. Families were separated, careers were abandoned, lives were destroyed. A once prosperous nation reduced to a humanitarian crisis in less than a decade. And here's the detail that should terrify you. Venezuela has more proven oil reserves than Saudi Arabia. More than Saudi Arabia, more than Iraq, more than any country except possibly Canada. This wasn't a resource problem. This wasn't bad luck. This wasn't a natural disaster. This was a monetary problem, a currency problem, a government spending problem. They printed their way into poverty. Don't trust me? Verify yourself. I've linked every major claim, statistic, and historical fact below. Check the official government reports, Federal Reserve data, and academic sources yourself. This information is too important to take anyone's word for it, including mine. Same pattern. Modern era, our lifetime. 3 examples, 3 different centuries, 3 different continents. Same pattern, same stages, same outcome. Now let me show you why the United States is following the exact same script. The United States used to have stage 1 discipline. Used to. The Bretton Woods system established the dollar as the global reserve currency in 1944. Every other currency was pegged to the dollar. The dollar was pegged to gold at $35 per ounce. Foreign nations could exchange dollars for physical gold. This created real accountability, real limits. The Fed couldn't just print unlimited dollars because France or Germany or Japan could show up with a suitcase full of dollars and demand gold in exchange. That was real money, sound money, disciplined money, and it made America the most prosperous nation on earth. The 50s and 60s saw unprecedented growth, rising wages, expanding middle class. The American dream was real because the American currency was real. But here's what nobody talks about. That system died in 1971, August 15th. President Nixon closed the gold window unilaterally, overnight. He went on television and announced that the United States would no longer convert dollars to gold. Why? Because we didn't have enough gold. We'd printed too many dollars. We'd funded the Vietnam War. We'd funded the Great Society programs. We'd overspent, and France knew it. Charles de Gaulle started demanding gold for dollars. Other nations followed. Nixon knew if he didn't close the window, Fort Knox would be empty within months. So he closed it. No more gold backing, no more convertibility. The dollar became a pure fiat currency, backed by nothing but government promise, government debt, government force. That was the end of stage 1. We've been in stage 2 ever since, for 53 years. Stage 2, expansion and temptation. After 1971, U.S. debt exploded. In 1971, total federal debt was $398 billion. Today, $34.7 trillion. That's an 8,700% increase. 8,700%. And that's just federal debt. Add in state debt, municipal debt, corporate debt, household debt, and you're looking at over $100 trillion in total debt. $100 trillion of borrowed money sloshing through the economy. But the real acceleration happened after 2008. The great financial crisis should have been a reset. Banks made reckless loans. They packaged garbage mortgages into AAA-rated securities. They leveraged themselves 40 to 1, 50 to 1. When housing prices stopped going up, the whole house of cards collapsed. Lehman Brothers failed. Bear Stearns failed. AIG was hours from failure. The entire financial system was on the brink. That moment was a choice. Let the system fail. Let bad debt get liquidated. Let reckless banks go bankrupt. Let housing prices fall to natural levels. Pain. Lots of pain. A severe recession. Maybe a depression. But a clean reset. A healthy correction. That's how capitalism is supposed to work. Failure is part of the system. But that's not what happened. Instead, the Federal Reserve intervened with unprecedented money printing. They called it quantitative easing. Sounds technical. Sounds sophisticated. Sounds like something only PhD economists can understand. But it's not complicated. It's just printing money. The Fed created dollars out of thin air and used them to buy government bonds and mortgage-backed securities. QE1, $1.7 trillion. QE2, $600 billion. QE3, $1.7 trillion more. Operation Twist, another few hundred billion. The Fed's balance sheet went from $800 billion in 2008 to $4.5 trillion by 2015. They quintupled the money supply, quintupled. And what did that money do? Did it go to workers? Did it raise wages? Did it help the middle class? No. It inflated asset prices. Stocks went up, bonds went up, real estate went up. If you owned assets, you got richer. If you didn't, you fell further behind. The wealth gap exploded. But at least inflation stayed low, right? At least consumer prices didn't spike. So the Fed kept printing, kept expanding, kept assuring everyone that everything was fine. There's no inflation. There's no problem. We can print forever. Then COVID hit, and they went absolutely nuclear. March 2020, the economy shut down. Businesses closed. Unemployment spiked to 15% almost overnight. The stock market crashed. Panic, fear, crisis. And the Fed responded with the largest money printing operation in human history. $3 trillion in 3 months. $3 trillion in 90 days. That's more than they printed in the entire decade after 2008. They bought everything. Government bonds, corporate bonds, even junk bonds. They backstopped the entire market. The Fed's balance sheet exploded from $4 trillion to $9 trillion. $9 trillion. Congress added fuel to the fire. Stimulus checks, $1,200. Then another $1,200. Then $1,400. Expanded unemployment benefits, $600 per week extra. PPP loans, Paycheck Protection Program, supposedly to help small businesses. Billions of dollars distributed with almost no oversight. Billions that were fraudulently claimed. Billions that went to companies that didn't need it. Infrastructure bills, Build Back Better, American Rescue Plan, money for states, money for cities, money for schools, money for everyone. Total COVID spending exceeded $6 trillion. $6 trillion of borrowed money pumped into an economy that was already drowning in debt. And here's the kicker. Inflation didn't spike immediately. It took 18 months. People thought we got away with it. They thought modern monetary theory was right. They thought we could print unlimited money with no consequences. Why the delay? Because of velocity. The money sat in bank reserves and asset markets first. It didn't immediately flow into consumer goods. Stocks went vertical. The S&P hit all-time highs while millions were unemployed. Real estate went vertical. Housing prices jumped 20, 30, 40% in a single year. Bitcoin went from 5,000 to 60,000. Billionaires added $3.9 trillion to their wealth during the pandemic. $3.9 trillion while small businesses died by the hundreds of thousands. But then inflation hit the real economy. By mid-2022, CPI inflation peaked at 9.1%, 9.1, highest in 40 years. Gas prices doubled. Grocery bills jumped 30, 40, 50%. Rent skyrocketed. Everything got more expensive. Your paycheck bought less. Your savings bought less. The dollars you worked so hard for were worth less every single month. And what did the Fed do? They finally admitted they had a problem. Jerome Powell, who spent 2 years saying inflation was transitory, suddenly changed his tune. Inflation is not transitory. It's persistent. It's a threat. We need to act. So they raised rates. Aggressively. Faster than any hiking cycle in modern history. From 0% to 5.3% in less than 18 months. The fastest tightening since Paul Volcker in the 80s. You know what that did? It made the debt unsustainable. That's where we are right now. That's stage 3. Stage 3. Crisis and desperation. The United States government now pays over $1 trillion per year just in interest on the debt. $1 trillion. That's 13% of the entire federal budget. Gone. Not to schools, not to roads, not to defense, not to anything productive, just interest, just the cost of borrowing. And that's with rates at 5%. Here's the math that should terrify you. If interest rates go to 7%, which is still below the historical average, interest payments will exceed $2 trillion per year. $2 trillion. That's more than Social Security, more than Medicare, more than defense, just interest. And the debt is still growing. We're not paying it down. We're not even slowing the growth. We're adding $2 trillion in new debt every single year. The deficit for 2023 was $1.7 trillion. The deficit for 2024 is projected at $2 trillion. Every year, $2 trillion more. The government can't stop spending because the entire economy is now dependent on deficit spending. Social Security payments, borrowed money, Medicare, borrowed money, defense contracts, borrowed money, salaries for millions of federal employees, borrowed money, infrastructure, borrowed money. Everything is borrowed. Cut spending significantly and the economy crashes immediately. Millions lose their jobs. Retirees don't get checks. Chaos follows. So the Fed faced an impossible choice. Keep rates high and let the government drown in interest payments. Let the banks collapse under the weight of underwater bond portfolios. Regional banks in 2023 were already failing. Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, First Republic. They held long-term bonds bought when rates were 0. When rates hit 5%, those bonds lost 30, 40, 50% of their value. The banks were insolvent on paper. Keep rates high and let the housing market crash. Mortgages at 7% mean houses become unaffordable. Prices have to fall. But if housing crashes, consumer spending crashes. The wealth effect reverses. People feel poorer. They spend less. Recession follows. Keep rates high and let the stock market crash. Higher rates mean lower valuations. The S&P fell 25% in 2022. If rates stayed high, it would fall further. And 70% of Americans have retirement savings in the market. Crash the market and you crash retirement. Crash retirement and you crash consumer confidence. Crash confidence and you crash the economy. Or cut rates. Restart the money printer. Choose inflation over collapse. Choose to slowly destroy the currency rather than let the system fail quickly. They chose option 2. They always choose option 2. September 2024. The Fed cut rates by 50 basis points. First cut in years. November, another cut. December, another cut. They're back in easing mode, back to printing. back to choosing inflation over honesty. But here's what's different this time. The world is watching, and the world is responding. Foreign central banks are watching. China has been dumping U.S. treasuries for 2 years straight. They've sold over $120 billion worth. Japan, the largest foreign holder of U.S. debt, is tightening its own monetary policy. They can't keep buying our bonds. The Bank of Japan is raising rates for the first time in decades. Saudi Arabia, which has recycled petrodollars into U.S. treasuries since the 1970s, is diversifying. They're accepting yuan for oil now. Yuan, Chinese currency. That was unthinkable 5 years ago. The petrodollar system, the foundation of dollar dominance, is fracturing in real time. BRICS nations are building alternative payment systems. They're settling trade in local currencies. They're reducing dollar reserves. They're buying gold at record levels. Central banks worldwide purchased 1,000 metric tons of gold in 2022. Another 1,000 tons in 2023. Why? Because they see what's coming. The privilege of being the global reserve currency is eroding. And when that privilege is gone, when foreign nations stop buying our debt, when they stop accepting dollars for real goods, the Fed will have only one buyer left for U.S. treasuries: itself. That's the definition of monetizing the debt. That's the definition of hyperinflation. That's the definition of a currency in terminal collapse. We're not in stage 3 by accident. We're in stage 3 by design. Every decision, every policy, every rate cut, every $1 trillion spending bill is pushing us closer to the inevitable conclusion. The math doesn't lie. The debt cannot be paid. The interest cannot be sustained. The currency cannot hold value. Something has to give. And that something is your savings, your paycheck, your future. Stage 4 is what comes next. And it's not pretty. There are only 2 possible outcomes at this point: hyperinflation or default. That's it. Those are the options. Hyperinflation means the Fed keeps printing, keeps monetizing debt, keeps cutting rates even as inflation resurges. They'll call it something else. They'll say it's necessary. They'll blame external factors: supply chains, Russia, China, corporate greed, anything except the real cause. But the result is the same. Prices spiral. 10% inflation becomes 20. 20 becomes 50. 50 becomes 100. The dollar loses purchasing power exponentially. Your salary, your savings, your retirement accounts, all of it gets destroyed not by confiscation, but by devaluation. You'll still have the same number of dollars in your account. They just won't buy anything. A gallon of milk that costs $5 today costs $50, then $500, then $5,000. It sounds absurd until you remember it already happened. In Germany, in Venezuela, in Zimbabwe, in Argentina, in dozens of countries throughout history. Default means the government admits it can't pay. It officially declares bankruptcy. Bond markets collapse instantly. Interest rates spike to 20, 30, 40% overnight. Credit freezes completely. Nobody lends. Nobody borrows. The entire financial system seizes up. Banks fail en masse, not 1 or 2, hundreds, maybe thousands. FDIC doesn't have enough money to cover the deposits. They insure about $9 trillion in deposits. They have about $100 billion in reserves, 1%. If the system collapses, your bank deposits vanish. Social Security checks stop coming. Medicare payments stop. Government services stop. Millions of federal employees don't get paid. Military personnel don't get paid. Police don't get paid. When the money stops, everything stops. Which one will they choose? History gives us the answer. Governments always choose hyperinflation over default. Always. 100% of the time, because default is immediate political suicide. You admit failure. You admit incompetence. You face immediate consequences. Impeachment, criminal charges, riots. Hyperinflation lets you pretend it's not your fault. You can blame corporations for raising prices. You can blame foreign adversaries. You can blame speculators. You can implement price controls and pretend you're helping. You can keep printing and delay the reckoning for months or even years. But here's the thing most people don't understand. Both outcomes destroy the middle class. Both outcomes concentrate wealth at the top. In hyperinflation, assets holders win. People with real estate, stocks, gold, commodities, they see their wealth increase nominally. People with cash savings get destroyed. In default, cash becomes valuable briefly before the system resets. But either way, the middle class gets crushed. Both outcomes lead to social instability. Hungry people riot. Desperate people turn to extremism. Angry people look for scapegoats. We've seen it in Germany. We've seen it in Venezuela. We're seeing early signs of it in America right now. Political polarization, anger, division, distrust of institutions. These are the precursors. You think America is immune? You think it can't happen here? Ask the Romans. They thought their empire would last forever. It didn't. Ask the Weimarans. They thought they were too civilized, too advanced for hyperinflation. They weren't. Ask the Venezuelans. 20 years ago, they thought they were too rich, too modern for collapse. They were wrong. I know what you're thinking. I can hear the objections forming in your mind right now. This time is different. That's what they all say every single time. It's never different. The details change. The technology changes, the names change, but the pattern doesn't change. The pattern never changes. The dollar is the reserve currency. The world needs dollars. And for now, that status is not permanent. It's not guaranteed. It's a privilege that's granted by the rest of the world, and that privilege is eroding in real time. The dollar accounted for 70% of global reserves in 2000. Today, it's below 60% and falling. Every year, a little less. BRICS nations are building alternative systems. The petroleum is growing. Central banks are diversifying. The privilege is temporary, and it's ending. When the privilege ends, the consequences are catastrophic. Because we've been importing goods and exporting dollars for decades, we've been living beyond our means because the world accepted our currency. When they stop accepting it, we can't import oil. We can't import electronics. We can't import food. Shortages follow immediately. America is the most powerful economy, the most innovative, the most productive. Venezuela had the most oil. Rome had the most advanced military for its time. Weimar Germany was an industrial titan. Power doesn't protect you from monetary collapse. It makes the fall worse because you have further to fall. And innovation doesn't matter if your currency is worthless. You can't eat innovation. You can't heat your home with productivity statistics. Technology will save us. AI will boost growth. We'll grow our way out of the debt. Technology doesn't change human behavior. It doesn't change government incentives. It doesn't change the math of unsustainable debt. AI won't pay off $34 trillion. Quantum computing won't reduce the deficit. Blockchain won't stop the Fed from printing. Technology is a tool. It can make us more productive. It can create new industries, but it doesn't fix structural problems. It doesn't fix corruption. It doesn't fix the fundamental impossibility of exponential debt growth. The Roman Empire had better technology than the tribes that eventually overran it. It didn't save them. They won't let it collapse. The Fed has tools. The government will intervene. Who's they? The same people who said inflation was transitory? The same people who said subprime mortgages were contained? The same people who said the banking system was sound in 2007? The same people who printed $9 trillion and said it wouldn't cause inflation? They don't control this anymore. The debt controls it. The math controls it. Reality controls it. There is no magic tool. There's no secret lever. There's just math. And the math says this is unsustainable. Every excuse is just denial wrapped in wishful thinking. It's the psychological defense mechanism that prevents people from seeing what's obvious. Because seeing it is terrifying. Accepting it means your worldview changes. It means your assumptions were wrong. It means your plans need to change. It means work, effort, difficult decisions. So people choose denial. They choose to believe the experts. They choose to trust the system. They choose to hope. But hope is not a strategy. So what do? How do you prepare for something this big? First, understand the game. This isn't about predicting the exact date of collapse. Nobody can do that. It might take 2 years. It might take 10 years. But the direction is clear. The outcome is inevitable. So you position yourself accordingly. Stage 3 is about currency devaluation. That's the primary risk right now. Your dollars will buy less tomorrow than they do today. That process is already underway. It's going to accelerate. Second, protect your wealth. Move assets out of pure dollar-denominated holdings. That doesn't mean abandon the dollar completely. You need dollars for daily life, for transactions, for emergencies. But don't hold all your wealth in dollars. Diversify into hard assets, real estate in strategic locations, not luxury condos in overheated markets, productive land, rental properties in areas with strong fundamentals, real estate with real utility. It's not perfect. Property taxes are a liability. Maintenance costs are real, but physical property can't be printed, can't be inflated away. Commodities, gold, silver, industrial metals, energy. These are real things with real demand. When currency loses value, commodities hold value. Gold has been money for 5,000 years. Every fiat currency in history has eventually failed. Gold hasn't. That's not a coincidence. Equity in productive businesses. Companies that produce real goods and services. Companies with pricing power. Companies that can raise prices as inflation rises. Not speculation. Not meme stocks. Real businesses with real cash flow. Foreign assets. Diversified geographically. Don't keep all your wealth in a system that's collapsing. Swiss francs. Norwegian krone. Singapore dollars. Currencies backed by more responsible fiscal policy. It's not perfect. Every fiat currency faces risk. But diversification reduces concentration risk. Third, increase your skills and flexibility. In chaotic times, adaptability is survival. The ability to generate income in multiple ways. The ability to work remotely. The ability to relocate if necessary. Skills are inflation-proof. Nobody can devalue your knowledge. Nobody can tax your competence. Learn practical skills. Not just professional skills, practical skills. How to fix things, how to grow food, how to repair, how to build. When systems break down, practical skills become valuable. more valuable than credentials. Fourth, build community and networks. When systems fail, people survive through cooperation, through relationships, through trust, through mutual support. The lone wolf fantasy is exactly that, a fantasy. Humans survive in groups. Invest in relationships now. Family, friends, neighbors, community organizations. These networks become critical when institutions fail. You can't stockpile everything. You can't prepare for everything. But a strong network multiplies your capabilities. Fifth, stay informed. Don't trust mainstream narratives. They're designed to keep you calm, keep you spending, keep you invested in a system that's extracting your wealth. They'll tell you everything is fine until the day it isn't. Then they'll act shocked. Seek independent analysis. Follow people who have been right, who predicted 2008, who predicted COVID inflation, who understand the pattern, who aren't beholden to institutions. Knowledge is power. Understanding is survival. And sixth, take action now, not later. Now. Because stage 4 doesn't announce itself with a press conference. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. It happens fast, exponentially fast. Venezuela went from prosperous to collapsed in less than 5 years. Weimar went from stable to hyperinflation in 2 years. When stage 4 starts, it accelerates. Every day, things get worse faster. Every week, the options narrow. Every month, more wealth evaporates. The window for preparation is closing. It's still open, but it won't stay open forever. Act while you can. While there's still time, while assets can still be moved, while options still exist. The Federal Reserve just triggered the next Great Depression. Not by accident, by necessity. They're trapped in a system of their own making. Trapped by decades of bad decisions. Trapped by unsustainable promises. Trapped by mathematical reality. They made their choice. They chose to print. They chose inflation. They chose to destroy the currency rather than face the music. Now you have to make your choice. You can deny it. You can hope it goes away. You can trust the people who've been wrong about everything. You can do nothing and hope for the best. Or you can prepare. You can act. You can protect yourself and your family. The pattern is clear. The history is undeniable. The outcome is inevitable. Don't be the person who saw it coming and did nothing. Don't be the person who understood the pattern but failed to act. Don't be the person who chose comfort over preparation. Because when stage 4 hits, when hyperinflation takes hold or default occurs, when the system breaks, there are no second chances. There are no do-overs. There's just before and after is too late. The clock is ticking.